Greetings, folks. I read to you from Luke chapter 14, beginning at verse 25, and I'm about to read a very difficult passage. Now large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure heap. They throw it away. Let anyone with ears to hear listen." So, as I've said, a very difficult passage, and one that I'm sure we've struggled with through all the years, and I have preached on it on several occasions, and we have to try to kind of water down the words of Jesus, particularly at the beginning of the passage where he talks about hating father and mother and brothers and sister and all the rest of it. However, it does seem to, this passage seems to continue with the theme of sacrifice, which I talked about last week. I talked about a sacrifice of praise, and I said that seldom do we make a complete sheer sacrifice, because there is always some kind of personal benefit. And in fact, it is known that the more generous we are, the more we give away, the more we sacrifice, the happier we are and the healthier we are, not just psychologically, but physically as well. And so even if we don't plan to benefit from being sacrificial in our actions and in our lifestyle, we benefit anyway. And I said last week that we shouldn't get too concerned about that, because we can only do our best, and God understands and appreciates the inclinations of our hearts. But today's reading kind of continues with the theme of sacrifice. What are we prepared to sacrifice with respect to our life of discipleship, following Jesus? What is the cost of following Jesus? What do we have to give up? What does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? And in terms of our ordinary lives and our ordinary lifestyle, what does it mean? Well, the cost of following Jesus is following in the way of Jesus, which will always be challenging, following the path that Jesus lays, traveling in the same direction. I think that is what it means. Heading towards the same goal, going where Jesus leads, adopting the same values and attitudes and priorities as Jesus shows in his life, seeking to have the mind of Christ. And so following Jesus is difficult, because it's not like when the disciples were around and it was a choice they had to make: either follow Jesus physically or refuse to, or give up halfway. And we have no opportunity to follow Jesus physically, but what does it mean to follow Jesus? And I believe it means to follow in the way of Jesus, follow in the path where Jesus has led. I think that what this means in terms of the cost of discipleship is refusing to allow other people to steer us off course. Refusing to allow other people, even family members or friends, to manipulate us and to control us and to decide what our priorities are going to be, decide the ultimate direction of our lives. Refusing to allow others to play the music to which we dance, and that applies even to family and friends. So I have absolutely no hesitation in saying that Jesus really doesn't want us to hate those to whom we are closest, that he simply wants us to have a sense of priorities and to make sure that nothing steers us off course. I think what this means, following Jesus means, is choosing the option of serving instead of being served, instead of throwing our weight around. It's not choosing to be humble, but instinctively being humble, because we are so shaped by the indwelling Christ. And so we begin to take on the personality of Christ, and we are humble. I think very definitely that the cost of following Jesus means being powered by love. And so often we will be sidetracked or steered off course by things that take place in our lives, and we have to readjust and refocus and remind ourselves that we are wanting to be powered by love. Not a wishy-washy, insipid love, which is really indulgence, but practical love and tough love, which confronts when necessary. It involves speaking straight and being ready to suffer for the sake of others. So we are trying to make sure that nothing throws us off course, that we don't get so involved in the stuff that life throws at us, or our busy routine and just the chores that we have to do, or the career that we're focusing on, that we're not so engaged in these things that we are knocked off course. We need to be determined to love and to encourage and to affirm. And as I've said before, I don't think that we are called to be nice, in inverted commas, to everybody, because truth is important, and some people have a warped perspective. No doubt they think we have a warped perspective, but they have an inability perhaps to see reason and to acknowledge error. And so loving others doesn't mean being soft and ready to fall over backwards for people. I think that the cost of following Jesus means being prepared to be last in the queue, not struggling to be first, not wanting to be at the top of the ladder of success. I think it means accepting anonymity, not demanding that we are noticed and acknowledged and recognized and applauded. I think the cost of following Jesus means being ready to give way, to yield, to surrender, to allow someone else to have people's attention, to allow the other person to have their say, to allow somebody else to steer the conversation, and even dominate the conversation for a while, allowing the other person to express their opinion and to express their perception of reality, and to be ready to bow to other people's wisdom and insight sometimes, and to be ready to recognize when we are in error, and to say that we're sorry. Be ready to do that, quite ready to do that, without balking at the thought of losing face or anything like that. I think following Jesus means that we should have a longing to see other people restored and whole and prosperous. Not in a material sense necessarily, but just flourishing in life. The most important thing is not that we achieve something significant in our lives, and I've spoken about this before. I think a big question is, can we persevere through to the end, despite the disillusionment, the disappointment, the failures by ourselves and by other people? Can we continue without losing our interest and our enthusiasm and our motivation and our drive? And so I also thought, maybe considering the cost of following Jesus means that we need to think again, what is my life's work? What is my life's calling? Do I have sufficient resources to complete what God has given me to do? And so this involves realigning continually with our priorities. My goal is to help those I encounter to know that they are unique and special and loved, and to be fully present to them and to affirm them. And I have to keep checking as to whether this is real in my life or whether I've lost sight of it, and so I need to readjust. The scariest part of this whole passage is not having to literally hate one's own family members and one's own friends, or even to hate one's own life, because, as I've said, this seems to be hyperbole, exaggerated statements about discipleship to communicate the fact that we need to be ruthless in pursuing what's really important. So that part of today's reading is not the scariest part. The scariest part is, I think, the final 2 verses of the chapter. If salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? If salt has lost its taste, it is worthless. And somehow our lives need to retain a distinctive quality right through to the end. Somehow our lives need to give off the flavor, the fragrance of Jesus. So we need to, as Paul says, be a letter of commendation. He speaks about people in the church being his letter of commendation, but in a sense we are called to be God's letter of commendation. That somehow, people see us and they can see God being made holy through us. Of course, this is an overwhelming responsibility, but that's what we seek. So this is not about hating anyone. It's not about hating anything. It's not about hating our own lives and not appreciating the gift that this life is to us, and our the wonderful senses that we have and the wonderful beauty that surrounds us. We're not called to hate our lives. I think it is good to recognize when a person is not good for our mental and emotional and spiritual health. And so I just want to really just mention that sometimes there are people that we encounter in our lives who have such a radically different perspective. Sometimes people are absolutely inflexible. Sometimes people just cannot be encouraged to hear another point of view. They're so so dogmatic, so adamant that they have got a hold on the truth. Sometimes they have an air of self-righteousness. And there are people that are a total drain on our resources. So when we are with them, we are exhausted. Life becomes complicated. We feel like we are being pulled down, pulled into a vortex. And so if there are those odd people who drain our resources, then I think that it is okay, and more than that, it is wise to avoid such people. I'm saying this out of a personal experience, really. This past week, there are a couple of people, I guess, in every community, and here where we live, there are a couple of people who make life very difficult. I'm the chairman of the board of trustees, the body corporate, and there are two people really that are very kind of aggressive and hostile, and or just totally exhausting, because they are never prepared to see a different point of view, and they're so absolutely convinced they're right. So we can get exasperated and frustrated to the extent that we will go crazy if we continue in a relationship with a person who has a warped perspective of reality, or whose attitudes are fixed and unyielding. So it doesn't mean that we are filled with hatred or anger or bitterness or thoughts of revenge towards that person. It just means that we recognize that perhaps neither of us will benefit from a continued relationship. So we just keep our distance. How can we lose our saltiness? As I've said, I think this is the scariest thing, because we might start out in life very zealous and very idealistic, and we have all these kind of maybe noble ideas about what we want to do and what we want to accomplish, and how we want to spread God's love and do God's work and all the rest of it. And as we get older and life becomes more complicated, it is easy to just kind of compromise and settle into a routine, so that our lives are really not much different from anybody else's. How can we lose our saltiness? I think giving up on our spiritual journey is one way we can lose our saltiness, just kind of because the life of faith becomes more complicated, more difficult. There are no easy answers, and we could just lose our enthusiasm altogether and our drive. And I think it's important that we are actively pursuing the spiritual life. I think it is dangerous that we can compromise to such an extent that we have no distinctive flavor. Excuse me. We can compromise to the extent that we have no distinctive flavor anymore, and we just adopt the world's standards and values and just go with the flow. I think that it is possibly a real danger for us to become so disillusioned and depressed. Maybe particularly living in this country with all the problems and disappointments and frustrations, that we're so disillusioned and depressed that we resort to generalizations and prejudices that reflect those of the society or the social group of which we are part. And we've got to be so careful about that. We can so easily slip into a conversation where we are just reflecting the values of other bitter people, frustrated people. We can become hard and unyielding because of our disappointments and our past experiences. We can become negative and critical and overwhelmed by all that is bad around us. So today the encouragement is not to hate those with whom we are in closest relationship, not even to kind of separate ourselves from them in a small measure. The message today is to focus on the saltiness. What makes us salty? What quality is there in our lives that makes us distinctive? And have we just become absorbed into the rest of society here and just reflecting their values and attitudes? Or do we have something different, something refreshing, something positive, something a quality that just makes us different and that people find maybe intimidating, but refreshing mostly? Do we have a deep inner joy that is manifested in the way we look at life and the way we approach relationships and so on? Do we have, in the face of all the difficulties, do we have a patience and a quiet trust? Do we have a resilience? Do we have a determination? Do we have a positive attitude, a belief that things can change and things can come right, and it's not kind of an ostrich burying its head in the sand kind of attitude, but just a continuing to believe in the possibilities of change and growth and newness and so on. So I pray that we'll all be able to visit this idea of being salt, what it means, and how we can reflect Jesus as we follow Jesus in our own lives and according to our own circumstances. Amen, and God bless.